because he had beat me so bad till I didn't know what to do. And where we lived, I had no family or friends. So I came home, and he came home, and I was out walking. I didn't know I was pregnant at that time. Him and his cousin rode up on me, put me in a car, beat me up, threw me out on the ground on the road. Luckily, it wasn't too far from the house, so I walked home, crying, bloody, clothes torn. And my dad, he said, well, you might have to go back to him because you can't stay here. I grew up in kind of like a dysfunctional family. My mother didn't go to church, but she knew the Bible, and she taught us as much as she knew. As a teenager, I was rebellious. I did everything teenagers do. I ran away from home. I got married young, had a baby after the marriage, and then a divorce, and then abusive years after that from the father of my child. I believed in God and Jesus, but at that time, that wasn't my focus. My parents didn't push it on us. They didn't go to church, but my mother was real spiritual. All of her siblings went to church, so she had the knowledge of the Bible from them. And then growing up, the first marriage was abusive. Then I started going to church, but I didn't keep going. So then, after I divorced the kid's father of 22 years, I got into church, I got the kids involved. I prayed. I don't think at that time I truly believed, but I knew that God was with me because he brought me through that stuff to that stuff. So I divorced the kid's dad. I started going to church. I got them involved. They grew up in the church. So I was praying and people prayed for me, but at the same time it was like I couldn't see it, so I didn't believe it really. But I prayed and all that stuff, but I don't think my prayers were genuine because I had that little thing in the back of my mind that I couldn't see. So as I got older...
Real quick, before you go on, you said that you got married young. Can you say more about how old you were and how that marriage came to be? And then if you would like to share any of the details about...
Let's see, I ran away from home at 17.
What made you run away?
I had a boyfriend. My boyfriend and my parents, they said we spent too much time together, so they tried to keep us apart. So he went off, his family sent him off to the army. And so I ran away to New Jersey to be with him. And we got married. And it was a short marriage, it was about 2 years. But in that 2-year time, he was very abusive. I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't have any friends. He would come in angry and fight with me and stuff like that. I came back home. My parents sent for me a couple times. And then my father said that you're married. You got to figure it out. And because he was abusing my mom, it was okay for him to say that. I was abused with this husband for about 2 years. Because even after I divorced him, the abuse got worse. And my father was like, well, this is what happens when you get married and get divorced. You should have stayed married. And I was like, how am I going to stay married in an abusive relationship? And I mean physically abusive. I was bruised most of the time. And so I just made it up in my mind that just because my mom stayed with him during that thing, I wasn't going to do it. I didn't even pray at that time about it or nothing because I wasn't in that mindset at that time. I was just trying to be safe. I didn't think about God or Jesus or nothing.
What was the final straw for you with that marriage that made you say, look, I can't do this anymore?
Well, I called home. He had beat me up pretty bad, and I didn't know at that time I was pregnant. So I called home, and my dad said, oh, we're not sending for you. You're going to have to stay there and take it. So I called my mom. And she was like, the money is on the way, right? So because he had beat me so bad till I didn't know what to do, and where we lived, I had no family or friends. So I came home, and he came home. I don't know if he left the army or whatever, but he came home, and I was out walking. I didn't know I was pregnant at that time. I was out walking, and him and his cousin rode up on me, put me in a car, beat me up, threw me out on the ground on the road. Luckily, it wasn't too far from the house, so I walked home, crying, bloody, clothes torn, stuff. And my dad, he said, well, you might have to go back to him because you can't stay here. But my mom overruled that at that time. And then I was sick. I was sick, getting sick a lot. So my mom made me go to the doctor, and that's when I found out I was pregnant. So now I don't want a divorce because I'm having a child. But I'm young, And my stepfather was abusive, and he was saying, you got to go back and figure it out. Like your mom figured it out, you have to figure it out. I said, I'm not her. I'm not her. So I divorced him. I think we were divorced before the baby was born, or right after the baby was born. I still had a lot of fear because of the abuse that I sustained from that. So I was always conscious of everything and everybody. So I moved back home with my parents, and I stayed there.
And you're about how old right now?
I was 19, almost 20. My baby was born when I was 19. So I stayed with them from 20 to 22 when I met the kid's father. Still living with my parents and his abuse to my mom. And she would pray all the time. So she would say, well, maybe you should start praying. And I said, Mom, I don't know about that. Because I don't know if I believe. I said, I can't see what I'm praying to, and I don't know how that's going to help me. And she said, well, I'll tell you what. She said, you think I'm just staying here. She says, first of all, I don't have any place to go. I don't want anybody taking care of me. I pray daily that a change will come for me. And unfortunately, it did. When she died, she had a full-blown black eye. She died in June 26, 1996, I want to say, or 97. That was really hurtful for me because when I went to the hospital and I seen her, they unplugged her before I got there. My husband at the time said, well, let's just wait and see what happens. So I left out of the house walking so my brother was coming to get me anyway. So he picked me up. We went there. She had a full-blown black eye. My dad was like, she's going to come back. She's going to be okay. And I just looked at him and like, you can look at her laying here with this black eye and be sympathetic. You did this, So I had a fear from that point on that that's how I would die. And I also had a fear that I wouldn't make it past the age that she made it past, because growing up in that, every person I chose was like that, not in the beginning, and you don't know that at the time. So then I married the kid's dad when I was 23, and we were together for 22 years, married 8 of those years. He didn't become abusive till the 10th year. It wasn't physical at first. It grew. In years, it grew. We were married before my mom passed, though. So she talked to him, she talked to me and everything, and she told me, she said, you always pray about what's going on in your life. And I kept telling her, I was like, Mom, I don't know if it hasn't helped me yet, She said, you know why you're still here? And I said, no. She said, because I've been praying for you. I said, well, who's praying for you? And she was like, well, probably my mom used to pray and her mom used to pray for me. So I was like, okay. So I tried to get him to go to church. He never went to church. So I got abusive with him. First it was more mental. And then as he got a little older, it got physical.
Can you give an example of the mental abuse?
Telling me what to wear, telling me how to speak, who to speak to, when to speak, what to wear, what to cook, almost everything. So my self-esteem was underneath me. At that time, I don't know what happened. I think he was having a midlife crisis, and he came in and he started accusing me of doing things that I didn't do, and then he grabbed me, and I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "You're gonna listen to me." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not with it." So we started fighting because he would fight me and I would fight him back. This was the first time that he ever fought me. So we fought back, and it was right at the time. He had me down on the bed, straddled with his knees on my shoulders, and he was choking me. And so when he was choking me, all I could think about is what my mom said. When something is happening to you that's traumatic or doesn't make you feel good at all, you should pray. So I started praying. I was calling Jesus, and I didn't know. I wasn't a believer or nothing. I started calling Jesus and praying and crying and calling God. And next thing you know, for some kind of way, my legs came up and grabbed his neck and flipped him off me, and he slapped me, so I slapped him back. And he was like, "Don't you ever hit me again." I said, "Don't you ever hit me again?" I said, "I don't know what you think this is." And so I was crying. I started crying, and I called my sister, and she said, "You want me to come now?" And I said, "No, don't come now." She was already in church, right? They were in church, so she came on my birthday and picked me and the kids up, and she said, "The only stipulation I have for you guys being here is that y'all go to church with us." And I was like, okay. I said, I don't know nothing about it, But okay. Whew. So we lived with them for about 3 years. But we went to church. So they picked us up on my birthday, which was November 15th. And that very next Sunday, we went to church with them. Mind you, I was a skinny, frail little thing. My sister was healthier, gorgeous, and I didn't have any church clothes. So she said, well, we're going to hook you up. She gave me an outfit, didn't really wear heels and all that. So she had me decked out in this little black and gold outfit, kind of suede-ish, and some nice little stockings and some little pumps and a trench coat. And I just thought I was everything smoking. So that was the first day we went to church. And I got saved that day. That day.
Let's go back real quick. So what made you decide in that moment to give your life to Christ?
I didn't have anything else. I had left my husband because we were still married, and I had 5 babies, matter of fact. Because Neil had already went off to college. So I had 4 babies. No job, I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't know what else to do. So thinking back to my mom, pray about it, I didn't never think it worked for me, but it saved my life more times than I knew. So that's what made me decide, because I figured nothing else I was doing was working. And my sister was like, you'll love this church, honey. These people are so lovable. And they embraced me like they have been knowing me forever. And so that's what made me want to go ahead and do it, because I felt warm and fuzzy and everything when I was there. So when they did the altar call, of course I hesitated because I was afraid. And I went up, and I can't remember the person that I talked to, but they said, now your life will change forever. And I was like, yeah, right. You know, I didn't really believe it, but having my kids grow up in the church changed my life a lot. And I didn't realize it at that time till later on when I look back. So I got saved that day, came home, I was crying, I was full of joy and everything. So we pull up to the house, and we get out, we're getting out of the car, and a van pulls up and blocks the driveway. And so my sister says, oh, that's my ex-husband. She said, come on, honey, let's take the kids in and let her talk to him. And her husband was like, no, she don't need to talk to him. You know, he was like, no. So he ran up the driveway, grabbed me, dragged me down the driveway with a gun in my side. So my sister rushed the kids in the house, and my brother-in-law, bless his heart, to this day, bless his heart, he came outside while this man was holding a gun to me and told him, man, put the gun down. We could talk about this. Y'all, I'm going to let y'all can go in the house, y'all go in the basement, y'all can have privacy, but this is not the answer to the problem. And so my sister was telling her husband, stupid, get back in here before he shoot you. You know, like, we can't have both of y'all shot and all this stuff. So he's like, no, I'm going to talk to him. He's going to talk to me. So he stood out there for like 10 minutes trying to talk him into the house. And he was like, no, she's going to do what I say, and she's going to do it now. He said, you go in the house and get my kids, and you're coming with me. And I was like, no, I'm not. And he was like, oh, yes, you are. And I said, no, I'm not. And I was just as calm, you know. And he said, you're not scared? And I said, no. He said, why not? I said, listen, I've been with my sister for about a week. She's been praying for me. I went to church today and I got saved. So if you kill me today, I'll be fine. But the kids will not be in your hands at all. So he said, well, I'll just kill your sister and your brother. I said, you can try it, you know. So he drug me down to the end of their street and around, because he was trying to talk to me to do what he wanted, but he still had the gun on me. So at this time, we didn't know the neighbor. They have wonderful neighbors at that time. The neighbor seen it and called the police. So about 8 cars of police came. So they came, they was everywhere. So they came, I didn't pay no attention to what was going on. They came and they had guns drawn. It was a horrible sight. They had guns drawn and everything. And so I didn't know at this time that he had dropped the gun in a bush. So when they pulled the guns out, he let me go and did like this. And I took off running. You know, and so it took 10 of them to get this little person in the police car. And I think he broke his arm in the police car because he was banging on the window. Because he was like, that's my wife, and that's my kids, and she's going to be with me. And this is, he was just telling them how things were going to go. And they were like, well, ma'am, why are you so calm? I said, I got saved today, and I don't know how to be nothing else right now. And they were just like, wow. So at that point, I started trying to learn, about the Bible and about Jesus. But I was a hard study. So I started going to Bible school, Bible study at church, and my sister was helping me, and my brother-in-law, he's amazing still. He was like, well, I'm reading the Bible. We're going to read it until we're done. And so I read the Bible cover to cover twice, not understanding a whole lot other than what my mother had told us. So it was like I was like a sponge. Everything I was learning, I was trying to learn, but at some point I got stifled in my learning. And I think that was right around the time the other husband came into play. And so I met a man. I was single and I was not trying to date. I wasn't doing nothing. I was praying. I said, God, if I meet another man, he gonna come knock on my door. That's what happened. He knocked on the door. He was a maintenance man where I lived. He was just as sweet as he could be at the time. His representative was really well. For about 1.5 years, he was everything smoking. He grew up in the church. He knew the scriptures. And I was just like, yeah, all right, this is good. So then on 9/11, I never will forget it. On 9/11, I had the kids were at my sister's and I stayed over his house. So we woke up just to see the 9/11 crash. And he kicked me out of bed. Like literally kicked me out of bed. And I was like, what's wrong with you? Because at that time, I didn't have any more fear. I didn't. And so he said, well, you said something I ain't like. I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't know, So he apologized and he showered me with gifts and everything. And I was like, I was a little leery. We still kept dating. And we got married later. I think I married him in March, the next March. And he would make me afraid. He wasn't physical at that point, but I was already afraid from that first incident on 9/11. So he drank, and the more he drank, the worse he got. I couldn't speak. If I spoke, it would be a problem. The kid's father wasn't allowed to come to the house to pick the kids up and stuff. It got really bad. He never did anything around the kids. And then when he got done, he would pray. Because his mother was a pastor at a church in Detroit, and she was an evangelist, and she went to Jerusalem. So he knew all the scriptures. He knew all this stuff.
So you said when he got done with what?
When he would really beat me up badly, that's when he would pray after that. And I was just like, well, I don't know about, I was kind of not sure about that. Because you did this, and then you turn around. You never repented or asked for forgiveness. You just prayed that your anger would cease or something like that. I can't remember everything he would pray. But
do you remember the first time he was physically abusive to you?
That's when he kicked me out the bed.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And I thought that was physical to me.
Because
he took his 300-pound feet and just kicked me out the bed. I hit the wall and hit the floor, and I was just like, what is this?
So the incident right before he prayed, what happened?
I think the kid's dad had came by to get them or something, and he wouldn't he couldn't knock on the door. Every time he would come, I would get beat up. This time, he was punching me in the face, knocking me down, kicking me, and I just told him to kill me because I was done. I didn't know what else to do. At that point, my sister came and she took me to the hospital. I don't never talk about this. She took me to the hospital first, and then she took me to the police station. I was black and blue all over, and after about 2 weeks, I went back to him again. And at this time, I was still going to church, and I had people pray for me and everything, and they talked to me and counseled me. But in my heart, I fell in love with the person before that. So that was the hardest thing for me. I must have left him and went back over 200 times. But because of the way he treated me before all of this happened, is what made me stay. So when I went to therapy, they said that it's like a drug. So now I'm like addicted to this man I love, but not because of the abuse, because of what happened before. And the abuse was really harsh, and so nobody could understand why I kept going back. So finally, one night, we were at home, we were talking. He got angry, he was drinking, and he always bought me stuff, clothes and stuff. So this night, I was getting ready for bed. It was like 12 o'clock. So I put on some pajamas. He was like, I bought them. Yeah. He ripped them off me. So I put another pair on. He ripped them off me. So I put a t-shirt on. He ripped it off me. I said, what is the problem? Well, you just think you can do whatever you want, and you're not going to be doing that. So then he took all the clothes out and threw them out the window, and I was like, I knew what was coming. So I said, well, let's go sit outside. No, I'm not sitting outside. We're going to sit in here. We're going to talk about it. I said, talk about what? So now my heart is racing. I'm afraid. So we went out. He pushed me first. And then I said, well, I'm going to bed. You can go do whatever. He said, no, we're going to go sit outside. So we went inside. He drugged me out. We sat on the porch. We sat on the porch, and I'm breathing hard. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? I was scared to death. So I went back in the house to go to the bathroom. He was sitting on the porch. So at that moment, I went in the bedroom, and I said, I got to get away from him, but I don't know how to do it. So then the first thing I thought was jumping out the second-story window. And I said, well, if you jump out and die, you'll be away from him. If you jump out and you don't die, he's going to find you. So I just stood there. So then he came up, and he said, what are you doing? And I was crying. I said, no. I said, I was just thinking about my mom, And he said, oh, okay. So we went, he grabbed my hand, we went back outside. So this time, when he went in the house, I took off running. I ran straight to my sister's. And that was one of the times, I think that was one of the last times that I didn't go back. They hid me. They wouldn't let him come over. He threatened to do all this stuff. They weren't afraid, they said he just want to hurt me, so they weren't worried. But so at that moment, I prayed, because I said, if I die, please have somebody take care of my kids. And then he came upstairs, so I didn't jump. As I was running to my sister's house, I was like, praying really works, because I could have died that day by his hand or my own hand. And so at that point, I started believing slowly. I was going to church. I was more into it. I was more absorbed trying to learn. But it was hard for me to learn because I've been out of school I didn't graduate. I've been out of school for years. So part of my healing was at 42. I got my GED when I was 42. And so at that point, my life was looking better for me. I was living with my sister when I got to GED. I was going to school. I was working 2 jobs. I was teaching at church. And I was burning myself out because I thought that's what I had to do. So the more I went to church, the more I could feel, I could feel something in me. And so then I started talking to my children different. I started acting different. I can look back now. At the time, I didn't see that. Now when I look back, I can say, oh, so this is when you really started. I still couldn't see, but I could feel. So I was like, well, every time I prayed, I could feel something. When I was in church and the Spirit was in church, I could feel something. So I went to Christian Love Fellowship for 13 years. My kids were involved in every event they had. I became an usher because the Spirit said, stop sitting around, get busy with the Lord. I became an usher. I ushered for years there. The kids grew up there. That was my church family, my home. I began to love it more than I thought I would. at the same time, this feeling inside me was like tugging. And it's really sad for me that it took me, let's just say, 55 years to actually say I believe in God and everything. And I could say all the things he's done for me up until that point, that I didn't realize that it was him doing it until I was 55. And I passed out at work. And I worked in Brownstown at the Walmart. And my daughter lived down there. So they called her, they rushed me to the hospital. I had 0 potassium in my body. And so she came in there, and I didn't know she prayed either. She prayed on her mama. Then the doctors came, they did all these tests, and they said I had 0 potassium. So they pumped me with potassium. They sent me home. They kept me overnight, and then they sent me home. And so I was just like, again, I'm here, not by my own choice, you know. And so it started growing more in me then. And I think when that happened, I might have been about 55 or 54 when I passed out the first time. So since 55, my body's been doing its own thing. So I just go with that, whatever it's doing. So then my aunt got sick. I was taking care of her. And I took care of her and my uncle. My uncle passed of cancer. She was in the hospital. He waited for her to come home. A month after she was home, he passed. And I don't know what date that was. That's another memory that made me think about, because I still had this feeling in me. She was a Jehovah Witness. They were trying to get me to convert, but that was a hard study because their beliefs are different and their wording is different. So I would be with them and I would be, you know. So when she passed last year, January. I was going to church. I stopped going to Christian Love for reasons that shouldn't have been reasons that I stopped going. But because the kind of person I was, I felt betrayed by the church, and that's not a reason, but that was my reason. So I just was out there floating around in the atmosphere, not going to church, still praying a little bit, and still feeling this thing. So I just was out there, you know, just like, maybe I go to church this week, maybe I wouldn't go for 3 weeks, whatever. And then Stacy, a friend of my sister's and mine, said, well, Niecy, you should come to the church with me. It's a really nice little small church. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So every time I was here, she said, Niecy, you should come go to this church with me. So I was feeling like something was missing, because it was. And so she invited me and I went. And I felt that warm feeling, you know. And so I went back again and I joined the church that next Sunday. And ever since then, I always have this warm feeling when I'm in the building, when I talk to a church member, or when I see people I went to church with, I have a very warm feeling. So now we have like Bible study, Sunday school, corporate prayer. I'm in all that. If I forget, it's because I'm old, but it's on my calendar, so that if it's Monday, nothing's going on today, but tomorrow, and I remember the days now, so that if it's corporate prayer, I'm in there. You know, if it's Bible study, I'm in there. If I forget, then I'd be like, I'm sorry, Lord, I forgot, because my memory is doing some things too. So now I go to church regularly. I'm an usher. I worship a lot at home. I love it. I just hate that it took me this long to feel this way about it. Because when people at church talk to me about it, I say, for years, I didn't believe it because I couldn't touch it. I couldn't see it. And they said, a lot of things are sight unseen, but I could feel it. So I knew it was something. But for me, I'm a visual learner, so I had to see something. But all this time I was seeing it, but I wasn't looking, because it was stuff that was going on with me that should have made me know that it was him. But because I wasn't paying attention like that, I didn't see it like that. Mm-hmm. So, and now my church family is like my real family, because they embrace me. Anytime I go to church and have a grandchild, they embrace them. They just love up on me. When I'm going through something, I don't have to tell them. They can look at me and tell. And they'll come and say, how you doing today? You look a little tired or something. They'll hug me and they'll say, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, how you know this stuff? But they do, because when you around them like that, they just know. So now my belief is very strong. I'm still growing though, but it's way stronger and way better than it was. I just wish that I had have gotten it way before now, because I would be such a better, if there's such a thing as a better me, I would be a better me, because I would have been in it longer, believed it longer, and knew, you know. And like even now, when my little baby, she just called me. They say a lot of stuff, so I always say, because I don't cuss her, I'm trying to stop cussing altogether. So when something happens, I'll be like, Jesus Christ, and she'll stub her toe and she'll say, Jesus, and I'm like, oh, you know, she doesn't like church, but it's in her because of me, you know, and I'm just overwhelmed with that, because they're babies and they don't know, you know, but she listens to me. And I have 2 granddaughters that I used to keep all the time. They can sing a whole lot of gospel songs because that's all they heard in the car, in the house, and they be in the back singing, and I'm like, you know, they're singing gospel because of me. So I'm glad now that I could be the praying grandmother for them that I had for myself, and I didn't know it at the time, you know. So I'm just full of joy now, and I don't have to see it because I see it in me. So,
who is Jesus to you?
Everything. My heart, my spirit. Now, had you asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said, I don't know, because I didn't. But now it's like my heart. It's like my heart, because everything I do, I try to lead with the best I can be with my backing of him. You know what I mean? So, like when I have to deal with the grandsons and they're talking reckless or whatever, I just be like, Jesus, fix it first before I come in, you know, because as a granny, I'm just coming in. But if Jesus fix it first, then I'm coming in different. And they're looking like, oh, she's not swinging on me, she's not cussing me, she's not doing none of this stuff. And so they look at me different. You know, even with the mirror, they all look at me different now, because when I handle them, I don't handle them. I let my spirit handle them, because it's a difference. It's a difference for me, and it's a difference they see.
So what would you say to somebody who may identify with the things that you've gone through that's watching this video right now? What words of encouragement would you give them?
Look in the mirror at yourself and never give up. Never ever give up, no matter what you're going through. What you're going through is a lesson. And then it will become a blessing later, because it will have helped you. Like for me, I would tell them to look at yourself and think about how you got through what you've been through. For me now, looking back, I know it was him that got me through a lot. But at the time, you can't see that because you're going through. So just look at yourself and you'll see what needs to happen. It may not feel good, but you can pray about it and it'll be okay. And it's not your time, it's his. That I had to learn. Because when I was like, I need it right now. But that's not how it works. Mm-hmm. You have to be approachable to be able to receive that. Because I couldn't receive it because I didn't believe. Then when I started feeling this thing, and I couldn't explain it, and the more I prayed and the more I went to church, it started growing, that's when I knew.
If you could pray for the people that's listening right now, I would really appreciate that. And they would too. Okay. Come before you, Holy Father, in your name, to pray for the people that have been through such things as me and not knew what to do. Now I'm giving them you, as they probably already have you, so that they can experience what I experienced to get through what I had to go through. Just keep praying, keep believing, and you'll be just fine, just like I was. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for sharing your testimony.
You're very welcome.